I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Cay Holbrook, who is a professor of special education, visual impairment at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. She provided instructional services to students who are visually impaired for several years and then obtained her doctorate degree from Florida State University. She has held faculty positions at Johns Hopkins University, the University of Arkansas at Little Rock prior to her tenure at UBC. Dr. Holbrook's research focus is literacy, including reading and writing in Braille. Dr. Holbrook is the recent recipient of the President's Award from Braille Literacy Canada and the Wings of Freedom Award from the American Printing House for the Blind. In this webinar, Dr. Cay Holbrook will talk about instructional services for school-age students who are blind or visually impaired. And Dr. Cay, it's our honor for us to have you on this webinar, and we look forward to learning a lot from your wisdom and experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veena. I appreciate your introduction. I'm going to start sharing my screen because I have a PowerPoint presentation. Sure. That, and let me just start the, I am so thrilled to be here with you. This is an organization that I was not familiar with, and I feel like I should be familiar with it because I feel like we have a common interest and a common goal. So thank you so much for inviting me to come and speak to you, and also for sharing with me some of the very, very good work you are doing in India and in other places in the world. So thank you very much. The goals for this webinar are to explore the roles and qualifications of the people that we call teachers of students with visual impairments. And a lot of times people will just shorten that to TSVI. We will also understand the components of the core and expanded core curriculum for students with visual impairments, which is the content that TSVIs are charged with instruction. We're going to examine specialized assessments, and these are required to be conducted by a qualified teacher of students with visual impairments. And then finally, I want to talk to you about some of the service delivery options that are used in the education of students who are blind or visually impaired. In part, I really want to make sure that I cover this because what we do in the work that we do as teachers of students with visual impairments in many ways depends on the amount of time that we have with a student and the type of service delivery that they are using. So I wanted to just give you a little perspective of where I'm coming from. My interest and my commitment to working with children and youth who are blind or visually impaired started very young. I got my undergraduate degree as a teacher of students with visual impairments in elementary education at Florida State. And then just from then on, I knew this was what I wanted to dedicate my life to. And so for many, many years now, I have provided instruction for children and young people who are blind or visually impaired, and also then moved into preparing teachers to work with these children. I currently, as you heard, live in Vancouver, British Columbia, which is in Canada. It's on the western part of Canada, just above like Washington State and not so far in the great scheme of things from Alaska. But prior to this, I was in Little Rock, Arkansas. I was in Baltimore, Maryland for a while, and I did my teaching with children in Atlanta, Georgia, and Rock Hill, South Carolina. But I also have some perspective internationally. I've spent quite a bit of time in London in the UK and working with colleagues there. I have been in China 7 times over the course of a 3-year period where we did some training for teachers there, and I've spent quite a bit of time in Sweden. So those are the kinds of places and the kinds of service delivery that are informing my conversation with you today. So typically, teachers of students with visual impairments they start out with a background and qualification as a teacher. This could be an elementary teacher, a secondary teacher, a special education teacher, but they start with a basis of understanding about education. This is where they learn to be a person who provides education to a group or a single person in elementary school or preschool even, and secondary. Then, in addition to that, they typically receive university trainings specifically designed to prepare them to meet the needs of those school-age children within an educational setting. So they are qualified teachers. They receive state or provincial level certification that designates them as a TVI, and they're often hired directly by a school district or possibly several school districts in order to serve the needs of students in that particular jurisdiction. Most of the time, teachers of students with visual impairments work one-on-one with students, and they often move from school to school across a number of different schools. But we'll talk about that kind of a service delivery later in the presentation. I thought you might be interested in hearing about the typical courses that are taken to become a teacher of students with visual impairments. Because of the basis of a teaching degree, most universities offer these courses as a graduate level for their students. So it's a master's degree typically. Sometimes it's an add-on to an undergraduate degree. But I just wanted to go through some of the things, and I hope it gives you a sense of the complexity of the job that we are asking them to do, and also the depth of understanding that we want them to have before they go into schools. So that we start with a Foundations of Education for Students with Visual Impairments course, which of course provides that foundation, some of the history, some of the basic information about this education that they need to have in order to keep going with the rest of the courses. Then Braille Reading and Writing, which is my course. I teach, it's not my course, it's the university's course, but I teach the Braille Reading and Writing course, and it's my favorite thing. I just really enjoy teaching this course. Then there's a seminar in low vision, because we do prepare teachers to work across the board with students who are totally blind, students who have severe low vision, students who have mild low vision, and we want our students to be qualified and prepared to work with that range of abilities. Then they have a course on problems and issues in general special education, because they are working in that context. They have a course in literacy instruction, which pairs with both the seminar in low vision and the Braille Reading and Writing course. They take a basic course in orientation and mobility designed specifically for teachers of students with visual impairments, not to prepare them as O&M specialists, but to prepare them to support the instruction that is being provided by orientation and mobility instructors. We asked them to take an assistive technology course. I was very interested in the discussion earlier about the computer technology and the computer programming courses, and this is clearly something that's very important for our students to understand, that assistive technology, and it needs to be very, very up to date as well. We have a course on working with students with visual impairments at the elementary and secondary curriculum. That's within a general education classroom. And finally, we end up with a course on research issues and trends in the education of students with visual impairments. We believe that teachers of students with visual impairments really need to have a broad understanding of what we know and what we don't know about this education. And throughout the entire program, they are involved in a practicum experience where they are working with students on a daily or weekly or monthly basis so that they can immediately apply the information that they have in the classes to real life situations. So now I'm going to talk about this idea that I told you about at the beginning with one of the goals, and that is the core and expanded core curriculum. Some of you may be aware of this concept, but you may not be. So I wanted to start this out because it's an important thing for us to understand. We used to really just work specifically in the core curriculum, which is what's being taught in general education classes. And then several years ago, I would say maybe 30 years ago now, there was a push to look at those skills that students need because they are visually impaired. The superintendent of the Texas School for the Blind, Phil Hatlin, had this idea along with colleagues of creating a curriculum that is called the expanded core. Not the only curriculum that is used, but we expand the core curriculum into these skills. And it's used to define concepts and skills that require specialized instruction with students who are blind or visually impaired in order that those students are able to compensate for the decrease in opportunities that they have to learn incidentally by observing others. We know that students learn a lot, children learn a lot from the time they are born by imitating and observing other people. This is in addition to the general education core curriculum that all students are taught and that teachers of students with visual impairments should be involved in. So this core and expanded core curriculum idea really informs not just what I've just told you about what's included in the UBC program for our graduate students, but it also informs what teachers then go out into the schools and work with families and children and school district administrators to put into place so that the students are prepared not just for academics, but for life. Oops, I'm having trouble. Sorry. There we go. So I just wanted to outline what these areas of the core and expanded core curriculum are. So what you should kind of think about as I am reading this is that all of this is the responsibility of a teacher of students with visual impairments. The core curriculum typically is planned by someone else, but the teacher of students with visual impairments who knows the students' needs and access abilities helps that teacher to adapt their lessons to meet the needs of that student. So the core curriculum is what everybody remembers in school: reading and writing, mathematics, science, social studies, civics, art, history. I just listed a few. But the expanded core curriculum is very, very well defined. There are 9 areas of the expanded core curriculum. The first is assistive technology. You can kind of think back to what I told you about the courses that are required for our students, and you can see these skills reflected in some of the names even of those courses. And certainly if you looked at the syllabi or the content of the courses, you can see how teachers are being prepared to provide this instruction. So teachers of students with visual impairments provide intense, ongoing, direct instruction in areas of assistive technology, career education, compensatory skills, and this is things like organization of their study space and things like that. Independent living skills, orientation and mobility, although that instruction lies primarily with an orientation and mobility certified specialist. Recreation and leisure, self-determination, sensory efficiency, and social interaction skills. And I'm just going to stop for just a minute and let you think about some of these things as and how important it is that direct instruction is provided. For example, let's take recreation and leisure. Students who are sighted can watch children play on the playground at a distance and are able to pick up some of the rules, some of the some of the social rules that go along with recreation and leisure. But sometimes students who are blind or visually impaired don't have that same opportunity, and in fact may not even have the same access to the equipment that is needed for recreation and leisure. And so it is the responsibility of the teacher of the visually impaired to make sure that that is taken care of. Now, that may be taken care of in a family situation or at a center or some other way. But if it's not being taken care of, it's a part of life. It's a part of a full and inclusive life that that would be missed by our students, which is why it becomes the responsibility of a teacher of students with visual impairments. So I had to put this in because our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is actually a teacher by training. And I love this quote, so I'm going to read it to you because I love it so much. He is currently the Prime Minister of Canada and dealing with all the COVID-19 crisis. And I just think this speaks to who he is in his core. I am a teacher. It is how I define myself. A good teacher isn't someone who gives the answers out to their kids, but is understanding of the needs and challenges and gives tools to help other people succeed. That is the way I see myself. So whatever it is that I will eventually do after politics, it'll have to do a lot with teaching. So I just love that quote as a part of the spirit of teaching and the core of the children's needs and abilities and desires and interests. So I'm going to pivot now and talk about the specialized assessments that are conducted by teachers of students with visual impairments. This is incredibly important as programs are planned for a student who is blind or visually impaired in the school system, and it is the responsibility of a qualified teacher. So we have 3 specialized assessments, essentially. The third one kind of has many to it, but the first one is a functional vision assessment. And I suspect from listening to your backgrounds and what you are paying attention to in this organization that you're familiar with functional vision assessments. I'm going to talk just a minute about it in just a second. And then learning media assessment and then assessments of areas in the ECC, which is expanded core curriculum. So as you may know, a functional vision assessment, or sometimes called the functional vision evaluation, is an evaluation of the day-to-day visual skills that an individual who is visually impaired has. So it's an evaluation of day-to-day visual skills. In other words, what a child or a youth uses in their daily life. It's paired with medical information, of course, and it helps the TSVI or orientation mobility instructor to determine how each eye condition translates into real life situations. You know, when we're so fortunate to have excellent ophthalmologists and low vision clinicians who get excellent information in a clinical setting. That's valuable and imperative for us to have. But it also is important that we look at how that actually has a function in their real life situation, and how any kind of a medical condition has an impact on the student's functioning at home, at school, in the community, inside, outside, in bright light, in low lighting, anything that we can think of that the child uses. And then a functional vision assessment should be updated yearly, or even more often if there are changes in a student's visual functioning. I remember when I was teaching children who were blind or visually impaired, I had a student who was in grade 4, and she came into my schoolroom, and all of a sudden, like maybe over the weekend, from a Friday to a Monday, she was having difficulty seeing things that she had not had difficulty seeing. So I was able, because I knew her functional vision in daily in her daily environment, I was able to call the parents, who then contacted the medical professionals, and they had a system of working through to see if she needed additional low vision devices or if there was something going on with her eyes. So it really helped for me to have that deep understanding of her visual functioning. Then learning media assessment is an assessment for selecting the appropriate literacy media. This is often a very difficult decision, especially for very young children, for children who have low vision and are just beginning to read. Their textbooks have fewer words in them, and the words are bigger and usually more clear. And so our observations of them may indicate that they are successful at using those early childhood books, but that might not translate into their ability to read compressed text at a later time. So literacy media refers to the way in which students access the general education curriculum and leisure activities, and includes Braille, print, auditory strategies, objects, and pictures. Objects and pictures, especially for students who may have additional disabilities and may have a different kind of communication system. Learning media assessment offers teachers and educational teams a framework or a decision-making process. It does not tell you that there's no scale in learning media assessment that says that a certain score means a certain media. Rather, it's a way for you to collect data and have discussions with the educational team, including the parents and including the child when appropriate, for selecting that literacy media. It's a decision and monitoring tool and looks at both conventional literacy for students who are in a conventional literacy program and functional literacy for those who are in a more functional literacy program or who have a different way of communicating. And it's very important to involve other members of the team in these discussions, because everyone comes to this table with different information, different perspectives, different desires, different data. This also is an assessment that should be updated every single year, and it requires the collection of ongoing data regarding how a student is using the literacy media that has been chosen. We don't really have formal assessments in the expanded core curriculum. And so most of the expanded core curriculum assessments are informal and are teacher developed and really address the individual needs and skills and abilities of a particular student, along with the goals that have been determined for that student by the educational team. It should include data that allow the teacher and the student to analyze progress over time. But this is an important part of the role of a teacher of students with visual impairments in the school system. So we're going to switch now to talk a little bit about inclusion. Sorry, about service delivery models, and inclusion is underlying our discussion about service delivery models. Inclusive education means that all students attend and are welcomed by their neighborhood schools in age-appropriate regular classes and are supported to learn, contribute, and participate in all aspects of the life of the school. We here in Canada are very committed to inclusion for our students who have disabilities, any disability. And we've been quite successful at setting up systems that allow students to be included in the regular classroom. But the reason that I said it underlies our decisions, inclusion has to be important for us in life. We want children and youth who are blind or visually impaired to move through the educational process in whatever way is best for them, and as a result, be ready and prepared and experienced in being included in the life of the community and the life of their neighbors and friends. And that can happen with a lot of different service, in my opinion, that can happen with a lot of different service delivery options. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. I just wanted to highlight the social aspect of inclusion. It is so important. There was a study that was done many, many years ago about the leisure time activities that students who are blind or visually impaired do in their spare time. And it was very surprising to see how few of those activities involved other people. And so we need to be sure that we're paying attention with an inclusive mindset to the social aspects of inclusion and education. And I just want to put in another plug for qualified teachers of students with visual impairments. Direct instruction by these teachers is critical to academics, social emotional skills, and independence of students who are blind or visually impaired. I can't think of anything that could substitute for that. We have, as you know, because you're in this field, there is a lot of misunderstanding and detrimental understanding about blindness and visual impairment. And we need people who are working with our students to have deep and compassionate understanding and being open to their unique and individual needs. So this is how people usually think of service delivery models in an inclusive perspective. And that is kind of all of the service delivery models listed from left to right, with the left hand being less physically inclusive and the right hand being more physically inclusive. And typically when people, this is an old-fashioned way, but it was a graphic that I could think of making my point. So from specialized residential schools at the idea of less, and you see that I'm saying less physically inclusive. Keep that in mind for just a minute. So specialized residential schools, specialized schools are next, then special classes within a regular school, general education school, then a resource room within a general education school, itinerant services, which means that the teacher moves from school to school while the students stay in their neighborhood schools, and then finally consultation services. And again, I want to point out that I think this is true from a physically inclusive point of view. I'm not 100% positive that it's always true from a social, emotional, academic point of view. So my feeling is that this is the better way to think about it, with the child in the middle and the service delivery models all kind of listed, they're all mixed up around the edge. And then because of the needs of the child or the student, the educational team will determine what service delivery would best meet those needs. So for this child, maybe they're mostly in itinerant services, but every once in a while, maybe for a workshop or a special skills program, they may spend a couple of weeks in the summer at the specialized residential school. Or maybe they have a month in the academic year at the specialized residential school, and then go back in itinerant services and use the information that they learned from that intense instruction in their classroom. And then of course, at the same time, the teacher of students with visual impairments is providing consultation to the classroom teacher so that the academic program could be appropriately planned for that student. So those are the 4 goals that I had hoped to reach to you in this webinar. And I know I've gone through things pretty quickly, but I'm hoping that maybe you have some questions.
Thank you so much. That was an excellent talk and a very good summary. It cleared up a lot of understanding for me about what a TVI is. So at this point, if anyone has questions, you can unmute yourself or raise your hand. And
yes. I have a question, Dr. Holbrook. I'm an occupational therapist, a pediatric occupational therapist. Very interested. My experience with working with children with visual impairments is restricted to, a few isolated students in the public school setting, mostly CVI. Occasionally we've had, children who are more severely impaired.
Right.
I guess my question for you is, for TVI, you had explained the coursework. Is there, to your knowledge, a certificate that one could get to be a certified teacher without, I guess I'm looking for a shortcut.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's very, very interesting. We have been having that very same discussion across Canada and in a couple of the states in the United States right now. You have to know that I am so incredibly committed to high quality services that I don't see a shortcut that can be used. I feel like I just don't feel like we can have a part of this knowledge. Now, having said that, depending on your role with those students, if you're not going to be a teacher of the visually impaired, if you are going to provide occupational therapy to with those students, then there may be some workshops and information that you can gather to help make your job more comfortable for you, because you'll understand some things. So I don't know if that's a very good answer.
No, I completely agree with you. I wouldn't want somebody to be a certified occupational therapist either. So I'm on the same page with you. There are no shortcuts when it comes to, taking on a whole profession. So no, thank you. I guess I'm just greedy.
No, I appreciate your interest.
Hello, this is MS Raju from Visakhapatnam, Vision Aid, India. I have a question.
Okay.
See, your ECC menu is of great interest to us, but among that, we here in India train our teachers only on 2 aspects, that is access technologies and O&M. The 7 other items mentioned by you will make a full spectrum, at least for information. Is there any way of getting online tuition of those things from you for our teachers?
The programs, the graduate programs in visual impairment are becoming very open to a wide range of delivery. And our program is actually a program that students come to Vancouver for 3 summers, but in between those summers, they're online classes. So they go back and teach and do their work during the academic year. And so I know that there are fully online programs. And I would say that I guess it's important for you to really have a deep conversation about what you believe needs to be the preparation of the teachers in your area. Mm-hmm. and then go to see how that can be done. I'd love to have your students. I'd love to have people from your area to learn with me. That would be fun, but I'm not sure we're set up for something like that right now.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ram will take this forward.
Okay.
Dr. Holbrooks, this is, sorry, Rita, you should go.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm a pediatric optometrist, and I have a question about, for example, if I see patients and I say, oh, okay, you know, they're coming to me for an exam. I tell them what the vision is, give all the recommendations, and I say, oh, I think you need a TVI, have an assessment at school. So, you know, I'm going to recommend you having a TVI and so on, so forth. Sometimes there is a problem because school districts don't have a TVI, or sometimes they don't know how to go about accessing that service. How does it apply in Canada, and how is it applied in the US to have an access to a TVI for a school district?
Well, first of all, I really appreciate your question and your willingness to say in your report that the child needs to be seen by a TVI. I think that that's step number one. And if the school district doesn't know how to access that, they need to find out how to access that. That's their responsibility. There are certain things that we see in ophthalmology or optometry reports that do concern us. Like sometimes we'll see a report that an optometrist or an ophthalmologist will say, this child needs to learn Braille. Well, that's not in the understanding of, and it's not actually a part of their assessment or their evaluation. And so that's why I so appreciate your question and the direction that you're going in. I would say that there needs to be some kind of an organization somewhere. If it was in British Columbia, there's a provincial organization that a school district could call up and just say, we've just gotten a student, we've never had a student with a visual impairment before, we don't even know what we're doing, and they would be supported. Now, they would have to be paying, and they would have to be committed to making sure, just like we said with inclusion, that this child is not only allowed to come to school, but welcomed into their school. But they would get support. So I guess school level administrators should have access in this day and age to someone who can support them. I would even ask if I was a school district administrator and this happened and I wasn't not aware, I'd probably even ask someone in another area of special education, somebody who's not in blindness, to give me advice on that.
So in the, just Upper now working in the public school, under the special education mandates, if there is, a report, whether it's from a doctor, an optometrist, it doesn't matter, the team reconvenes and has to look at that report within 10 days. That's just the mandate. And the school district is obligated to address the recommendations made. So, in our area, we have Perkins that, provides us consultation services for students with any kind of visual impairments. And we don't, TVIs are not part of the public school staff. They serve more as in the consult model if we do have children that require them.
Yeah, I have a real concern about the consult model. I know that happens in Canada as well, and I know other places, but it's not enough for the person who knows the most to be farther away from the child than a person who doesn't know. The most of the time it's a paraeducator who is providing some kind of instruction, even if it's under the supervision of a teacher of students with visual impairments. There's real concern, and we require that a teacher be certified for sighted children. And to say that children who are blind or visually impaired who may have more intense needs would not have that same level of certification and qualification, I think is sad. And I know a lot of people who work in Boston, and I have in Massachusetts, I have incredible respect for them. You've got a wonderful professional community there, but I don't like that model. Sorry.
No, I mean, I'm with you, but, you know, having worked, you know, over 25, 30 years in the public school system, I've yet to see a district hire a TVI as an instructor, as a teacher on a full-time or even a part-time basis. It's usually a weekly, a monthly consult to the special education teacher. It's unfortunate. And if the child has really intense needs, you know, it's really left to the teacher of, you know, the intensive special ed teacher to provide the inclusion supports with consultations. So
yeah, it makes me very sad, because I think, you know, these children need the best we can give for them, the very best, and they deserve it, and they have a right to it. And if I guess it bothers me that this knowledge that teachers of students with visual impairments have is only partly being used. So that was my soapbox.
No, that's it's a valid point, though.
very valid, very valid.
I think
Ram, I have a quick
question. Go ahead.
Yep. Okay, back to, you know, what you laid out right at the beginning about the students with visual impairment need to have teachers teach them the co-curriculum as well as the expanded co-curriculum.
Yes.
Do you find it's easy to be able to fit both into just a regular school day, or the students get shortchanged on one or the other?
Yeah, that's a huge challenge. What the teacher of students with visual impairments is not teaching the core curriculum.
Yeah.
So the student typically, if they are included in a general education classroom, they typically are fully included from the first part of the morning to the end of the day in the general ed classroom, with help from the TVI on things like, let's say a student was going on a field trip to the zoo and they're totally blind, and they need, number one, orientation to the zoo, and number two, they need some kind of adaptation in order to enjoy the zoo. And so the teacher of students with visual impairments would help the classroom teacher and probably work with some of the para-educator who may attend the field trip. So all of that happens in the general ed day. The expanded core curriculum sometimes happens by, you probably saw that a lot of the things in the expanded core curriculum seem like family things, seem like things that would be done in the family. Independent living skills. Well, a teacher of students with visual impairments is not likely going to be teaching a child how to make a bed, but they may be working with the parents on the adaptations that would be needed in order for the child to even know what kind of skills they need in the daily life. So it expands the day more, but it attends to all of the skills that the child needs. And typically there's maybe an hour somewhere in the school day. I've worked on skills before the opening bell. The parents brought the child early, and I don't know if that happens anymore with collective agreements. But you look at where the child is, what they need, and how to fit that in. But you're right, it's a huge challenge. School days are full anyway for sighted children.
Right. Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah.
It is a good question.
Thank you, Rita. I see one person on the call. The name is familiar, and I think she's a TVI working in India. Nandini Menon. Nandini, if you can hear me, if you can unmute yourself.
Hello. Yes, I am a TVI. Hi. I am a TVI, and incidentally, I'm from FSU as well. I studied under Dr. Lewis. I'm a TVI.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Yes.
I've heard a lot about you actually from Dr. Lewis. So it's really nice to be on this call with you.
Yeah, and Nandini, many of us here have met Shalini as well. That's how I made the connection.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact,
So,
Sonal Patel, who's Pranav's mentor, had helped me make that connection. So thank you, Sonal. So any comments
okay.
about TVI in India and what is working and what is not working? Just want to get your perspective.
Well, this whole conversation has been very interesting because for one thing, there are very few people in India who do learning media assessments or functional vision assessments. Most children usually come back with a totally blind stamp, and they will need Braille kind of stamp. And whether they have low vision or they're totally blind, if they go to a residential school in India, most of them are taught Braille. So that is a huge issue, and they're actually not encouraged to use their remaining vision. So that's something that we're slowly trying to change around here. I work in an inclusive school, but I also consult with Vision Empower, which is a NGO.
Vision Empower partners with Vision Aid for the hackathon every year. So I know.
Yes. So that's where we are trying to reach out to more schools, residential schools, and try and change that a little. But yes, I think that we definitely need in India definitely more training in working with children with low vision. And the expanded core curriculum is not focused on very much at all. And for me, that's something that's close to heart, because you can be educated but not an independent functioning individual. And then how do you grow up and contribute to society with just an education? So these talks are really important because it really brings to perspective what's going on in the rest of the world and how we need to catch up. We need to work on our programs to make them better, because there's a lot falling through the gaps right now.
Yeah.
You know, we have people falling through the gaps as well. And we just hope that we can make that as few as possible and do our very best. And I appreciate that. And your comments are well received.
Thank you so much, Nandini. Does anyone have any other questions?
Dr. Holbrook, I have one more question. This is Aparna again. I'm the pediatric optometrist.
Okay.
So the question is now, visual impairment, right? It's such a broad spectrum now, right? With so many people. For example, you know, I have a child who I just got an email a couple of days before from an ophthalmologist saying, oh, this child is the questions are coming in saying, we want to have a child has craniosynostosis and has, you know, overall functional vision. They want to have a better understanding of peripheral vision and depth perception. And so the ophthalmologist reached out to me and said, you know, what would you do? And I said, you know, I think I can see them. I can give accommodations because I spend a little bit more time with the child, and I can do a little bit more detailed assessment and talk to both the parents, provide the recommendation. And I said, this child basically probably needs a TBI, you know, observing and going to the classroom, kind of looking at the situation and make a more holistic judgment of what is needed than this thing. So the question is, with such a broad range, right? This child is not a child who you would classify as blind or even low vision, probably has like a 20/100 better vision, but still needs that accommodation and understanding of how to manage functionally in a regular environment. So do you see patients with just like, you know, in terms of the low vision criteria, or are you beginning to see this expanded bandwidth of patients who are functionally low vision, but not truly low vision?
Yeah, it's a dilemma that we're trying to address currently. Unfortunately, we have a workforce of TVIs we just don't have as many as we need. And so it's very difficult to expand our student base. Having said that, if there are ways that the skills of a TVI could actually be used to support that student on a long-term or short-term basis, I don't know any TVI who would not embrace that.
Thank you so much. Good question, great answer.
Great question, Aparna.
Any other questions or comments? We have another 5 minutes.
And Dr. K, I just want to mention Dr. Aparna Raghuram is also on the Vision Aid Board of Directors and volunteers with us.
Yeah, as well as Dr. Lubaina, who was
Dr. Lubaina, yes.
So she's a pediatric occupational therapist, and she's also on our...
I think you have an amazing group of people that are working toward a common goal.
We do.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're very lucky to have such a dedicated team. As you can see from their questions, they're very passionate about this space.
Very knowledgeable and yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions from the audience before we close for the evening?
Dr. K, this is Justin.
Okay.
What are the leisure activities that are generally supported for the children?
What are the leisurely activity? The leisure
Yeah.
activity? You know, I've seen teachers of students with visual impairment who have tried to do just almost anything that the child's interested in, all the way from beep baseball to beep basketball to checkers to Monopoly to board, you know, any kind of board games to video games to. So what we really want is not just to have one or two things that children can choose from, but to have the wide range that children who are sighted and adults who are sighted get to choose. Hiking, swimming, all kinds of things that that children. Now, a lot of them need adaptations, and that's important, but that's what teachers do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Kay, Justin is one of our instructors at Vision Aid. He teaches English and he is blind. He lives in Bangalore. So just to make a connection there. So thank you, Justin. Good question. Any other? I saw Deepak had a question. Deepak,
good morning, Dr. K. A wonderful presentation. A lot of new things to learn and see how we implement it in India, because we see that, yes, the points that were raised that we don't have the same system of TVI here. So at tertiary institute like LV Prasad, what we do is we do the functional vision assessment. We have a team of rehabilitation professionals who will assess the learning media assessment, and then they would guide those kids. But what we are finding this challenging is that now in this time of this COVID, when the online classes happen, unless the kids have learned the use of technology, it's difficult to access. So what is your comment about it? And then how do you see that in this situation, the leisure activity and social interaction and the safe navigation, because they explore most of the thing using touch. So,
yeah, this is an incredibly tough time. You made me want to say something else. I want to make sure that I say that I just gave you kind of my perspective. That's why I started out with my perspective. I'm not saying this is right for every country or every society. Everyone has to figure out what's right for them. And I don't want to leave anybody with an impression that there is a right and a wrong way to do this, although I did talk about the wrong way a minute ago. But so in the COVID-19 situation, I'm not sure I have any large ideas for you. I guess the thing that I would focus on right now in terms of leisure and social is how the family can interact with leisure and social activities, because a family group presumably would be isolating together, and so they would not have those same kinds of issues of touching things and being close to someone. But it's a huge discussion right now among people who are blind or visually impaired, because there's so many restrictions that they're having difficulty navigating.
are there any guidelines prescribed from the say American Federation for the Blind or any other organization, any such guidelines for the visually impaired? How do they join back their workplace, or how do they go back to school? And what are the new normals for them?
Yeah, I'm not familiar. I don't know if there are any right now. There may be people working on them, but I have not seen any come out yet.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Sorry.
Thank you so much, Deepak. That was a great question. Anyone have any other questions? I have one more, but I'll hold my questions.
Good morning. I am Savita here. I am from Vividha Trust, a small NGO with a couple of special educators for visually impaired. We work towards inclusion. So just wanted to share that because of the COVID situation, we have had 2 long months of online sessions for our students, basically focusing on the extended core curriculum and also leisure activities, where we coupled up with the parents, where parents supported and where we instructed, and a little older children could do it themselves, and it worked beautifully. This is, just wanted to say that, even with all these situations, we could still manage, but we would need some support from the parents, which they would be willing to, because they also have the need to keep the children engaged.
Yeah, that's an excellent suggestion. Thank you very much for saying that.
Thank you. That was a very good input from you. Thanks for sharing your experience there. Where are you based? Which city?
We are in Bangalore. Nandini happens to be one of our consultants. In fact, she is a mentor of one of our board directors. So she is in touch with us.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
I think Balaji also knows us. We are Vividha Trust.
Very good. Nice to meet you, Savita. So, Kay, if I can just ask a question. Sorry, we are keeping you a little later than what we had planned. The relevance of Braille in education and as a part of the curriculum. VisionAid is committed to Braille. It's an integral part of our model. We are investing in Braille training and even in refreshable Braille devices and like the new evolutions of Braille. Every once in a while, we run into NGOs and even leaders of NGOs, some of them visually impaired, who tell us that they are not investing in Braille, they don't see a future in Braille, and they ask us, why are you investing in Braille? And, because everything is going digital and there's all this new technology coming out. So, I'd just like to hear your perspective on that and where you see the world going in terms of Braille and relevance of Braille for teaching visually impaired.
Well, I think you will find that I am your best friend in this topic, because I completely agree with you. Braille is no more becoming obsolete than print is becoming obsolete. And when we stop teaching sighted children who can also access digital communications, when we stop teaching them print, then you can talk to me about stopping teaching Braille. I won't agree with it even then, but that's never going to happen. And so I think that the people who are saying those kinds of things need education. They need to be in contact with Braille readers, adult Braille readers who see the value and use Braille on a daily basis. There is a very, very strong positive feeling about Braille among teachers of students who are blind or visually impaired. It's almost a rallying cry for us. I think that the future of Braille is bright, and we have a conference every other year in the United States. It has also been in Canada, called Getting in Touch with Literacy, and it's a conference for teachers, mostly for teachers of students with visual impairments, related to literacy, all areas of literacy, but there's a big cheerleading squad about Braille in that entire conference. And so it would be shocking for me if there was a decrease in fact, I see an increase
Okay.
and commitment to Braille.
That's good to know. So we are on the right track.
You are absolutely on the right track.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that perspective. Okay, we are almost past 5 minutes. So any final questions? I guess we can take one last question if anyone has any questions before we close. I see a lot of nice comments coming in on the chat. So thank you all for your comments.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, and okay, I don't hear any questions, so don't want to hold you up. Thank you for the excellent talk. I love the discussion, the lively questions. So thank you all for the questions. And Dr. Kay, it was a pleasure to have you come and address our webinar, and we learned a lot from you. And can't thank you enough for sharing your wisdom, your experience, and your perspectives.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I appreciated it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all, and goodbye. And
Yeah, everyone.
Bye-bye.